Miss Laura Dean-Griego.
Yes, hello. Uh, yes, my name is Laura. I am a former Blizzard Quest designer. I've worked in the games industry for about the past 8 years. I was a victim of the 2024-2025 layoffs in the games industry, which is why it's a former Blizzard Quest designer. And now I'm trying to launch my YouTube channel. So I'm trying to make something that's all my own, using my expertise in writing, world building, creative, everything else, to bring something that's uniquely me to a new audience.
Uniquely you. Welcome to Book 101, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And how do you define world building, and why does it matter to you as a reader or a creator?
Yeah, so I think that world building to me is the setting that a fantasy world will or fantasy story will take place in. Um, it's the bones, the backbone, the spine of the story, but it also gives it a personality. Something that we championed over at Blizzard was having the world be a character. And I think that's really important for fantasy storytelling because the world can tell you a lot about the people in it without having to spend that time on exposition dumping on your readers. Environmental storytelling is something that's very common in games, but it's something that books can do as well, with descriptive visual storytelling. And I think it matters because it makes the setting feel that much more real. And for something like an MMORPG or a video game, you really want your players to be engaged and feel like they really are in that place, especially with the style of game that World of Warcraft was in. Right now, I'm working a side job at Disneyland, of all places. But that's something that world building is center to what we do there as well. So it really is a full circle kind of situation that I'm in with the world building aspect. But I think it's really crucial to having those integral stories that really resonate with readers.
Very well said, Miss Laura. Beautifully articulated. Very well said. What separates functional world building from inspired world building in your eyes?
Yeah, so I think functional world building is stuff that you have to include for the bones of whatever kind of story that you're making. So there are certain things in video games that are necessary for the player to interact with the world around them. And some games are able to build this right into the story of the world. For example, Final Fantasy XIV has their aetheryte crystals, and that in-world element, the element of the world building there, translates out to a broader mechanic of allowing the players to fast travel. So that's an element of functional world building. Whereas World of Warcraft, we didn't have anything like that. So players do have to commute to their locations in real time. You have to take a boat or an airship to somewhere instead of being able to just teleport with a crystal. Versus inspired world building is, more along the lines of what World of Warcraft did, especially back in the day when they kind of invented the genre almost of, the fantasy MMO. But they just wanted airships and boats and things like that, but didn't think about the repercussions of how that might affect the player experience later on, where now travel is a central part of the gameplay of the world just by necessity, because that's what players are going to spend most of their time doing.
Indeed, totally agree with you, Miss Laura. How do magic systems, lore, or history shape your emotional connection to a fantasy world?
Yeah, I think that magic systems are one of those things that can make or break a fantasy system or a fantasy world for me. Um, I'm very much more of a fan of the soft magic systems, more akin to, I mean, World of Warcraft has uh, as soft as you can get of a magic system while still maintaining an element of that mechanical stuff that has to happen with a video game. But I think having it be softer allows players or readers to connect with it more, right? Like my mind goes to, especially because I work at Disneyland, I work in the Star Wars land. So it's front of my mind at all times. But They have the force, right? And it's not
Yes.
super well defined. But one thing that resonated with people a lot with the new trilogy is the idea that anybody can possess the force. And it's because it's not very well defined. It's not like you can point to it and say, well, I didn't study this or that, so I can't actually have the force. You can kind of make believe with that in real life and think, maybe I do have the force. We've all tried to like use the force on our own. Like no matter who you are, you've tried to jump off your TV, jump off your couch and fly or move something with your mind. And if you compare that to the other most successful immersive theme park land, you have Harry Potter, which is similar. It's not as soft, but like they sell you the wand so you can make believe and be like, they don't define it enough in universe for me to be like, this wand definitely won't work. There's always a chance. There's always like a little chance.
There are always a chance. People don't lose hope. Indeed. Miss Laura, what fantasy, or yes, what fantasy world that shaped your expectations of originality, and what made it stand out?
Hmm. So, one of the first magic systems, one of the first fantasy worlds that I was introduced to when I was really young, I wasn't a big Harry Potter kid. I actually
Yes.
read Aragon by
Mm.
Christopher Paolini, The Inheritance Cycle, more broadly, as it's known now. It was going to be a trilogy, and then it got too long, so he made it into 4 books and called it a cycle. Um, but the Land of Allegasia was actually very well thought out on his part, and he was only 19 when he wrote it. And maybe it's kind of poetic that I ended up working in Star Wars land because over the years there have been a lot of allegations that he kind of lifted the plot of Star Wars. But I mean, doesn't everything because it's the hero's journey. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But the amount of detail that he included in there, it had just enough of the magic words and like the fake language like Tolkien has to kind of carry the plot of the story. He's able to create these moments of there's a bit in there where Aragon blesses an infant, but he doesn't understand the grammar of the fantasy language that he's using, and so he ends up cursing the infant. And I don't think that was something that he necessarily planned on early on, but I think it was something that within the bounds of what he had defined or not defined, he was able to add on to it later, which I think that level of detail and being able to add on to it and come back to it is something that I expect in the fantasy stories that I enjoy nowadays.
Miss Laura, can you tell us about your latest video about recycled animation or
Yeah.
Disney's recycled animation? Oh,
Yeah. So
animatron. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's about their recycled animatronics. If you've ever been to the Disney parks, any of them, you'll know that they have lots of these super incredible looking robotic figures. And Disney calls them animatronics. But these rides will be open for like 20, 30, 40 years. So you'll see them, your kids will see them, and your parents will have seen them. But when the rides close, a lot of times they reuse parts of them because they're really expensive. Um,
Yes.
but they get reused in really weird situations. So there was a ride at Epcot that had it was all about the history of transportation and stuff. It was called The World of Motion. And it had a scene called the world's first traffic jam, and it was a horse and a buggy and all this stuff of like turn of the century America and what a traffic jam might have looked like back when we still had horse and buggy. So one of those things that had fallen out of one of these carts was a crate of chickens. And so when they redid the petting zoo into like Mickey's Toontown Fair, they gave Goofy a roller coaster that went through a barn called the Barnstormer. And they took that crate of chickens from the ride when it closed and put it right there in the other ride. And a lot of guests didn't know, but those were the same chickens.
The same chicken
Yes.
indeed. And Miss Laura, what's the first sign for you that a fantasy series has clicked and that is something special?
I think it's when the fans start making their own original characters in that fantasy world. I think that the reason something like Azeroth, which is World of Warcraft's planet, their world, hits home is because you create your own character that lives there and their own story of what it is like to live in that fantasy world. I think if you look at the more successful theme park lands that are based on fantasy worlds, you have Star Wars and Harry Potter. And those are two worlds that are you're very able to insert yourself and imagine what it would be like. You know, you can imagine what it would be like to be a Jedi or just to be a regular person on Tatooine. Or what if you were just like a bounty hunter or a scrap collector or something like that? And with Harry Potter, you can go, what if I was a Gryffindor or a Ravenclaw? What if I was a teacher? Or what if I was, a bad guy? What if I was one of the Death Eaters? And it's really easy to imagine yourself as one of those many different roles that they have. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily about factions, but more about having that living, breathing. You need to have your main characters, but you also need to have all of the support and all of the breath and life that goes into having a real lived in place.
Yes, indeed. And Miss Laura, can a series with a familiar trope still feel fresh, or what elevates it to beyond cliche?
Yeah, so I think the kinds of things that keep something feeling fresh is not necessarily how they use the tropes, because we need to keep some of those tropes for familiarity. Otherwise, you're going to be thrown into something completely new. And a lot of people want something familiar. They don't want something completely different. They want the thing that they liked before, but with something that feels fresh and new. So, um, and I think case in point, World of Warcraft is about as cliche as it gets. It's the most generic fantasy type situation you can imagine. And it's still popular today. Same with Tolkien. Like that's that he
Yes.
invented the cliches there, but it's still very popular, and I think it's popular for a reason. But at the same time, you have a lot of things that can start to feel formulaic, and I think it's because they're repeating the tropes without understanding why they're used or trying to invent on them in any way. One thing I was taught in college about script writing and screenwriting is that you should take something familiar and add a twist. And that's one of the easiest ways to come up with a good concept for a story. Is like, what if we did, Finding Nemo, but they were cats? And that's, probably a fine animated movie that someone will pick up.
Yes. Totally agree with you, Miss Laura. So, as a former Blizzard Quest designer, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
So originally when I got let go from Blizzard in the wake of we got purchased by Microsoft, and then they let a bunch of designers go. As you know, the games industry that is so common.
Yes.
Initially, I was just trying to get back into the games industry. And I sent out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. And the story of being laid off and let go is so common that it's happening to basically every studio and every team in the industry. So I'm fighting for these jobs with people that have been in the industry longer than me, who have more experience, or maybe know people on the teams. And so I was getting rejected left and right. Um, and I needed I needed money. I needed a job, which is why I work at Disneyland for now. But the other thing I wanted to build was take that creative talent and that technical expertise and everything that I honed at Blizzard and turn it into something that's my own that I can't get laid off from again, which is
Yes,
YouTube.
indeed. Well, looking forward for your success, Miss Laura,
Thank
and
you.
I we need a billion-dollar job, people.
Yes, right.
And we are creating a billion-dollar job, right,
Yep.
Miss Laura?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
congratulations for that, and looking for more success in your life.
Thank
And
you.
what will be your advice for those people out there who want to be like a designer too, like you?
Yeah, if you really love it and you really want it and you want to pursue it, go for it, because nothing else will scratch that itch. Nothing else will satisfy you. If you have that bite of creativity that you need to do this, pursue it. But know that it's not easy. It can be thankless at times, but the rewards are immeasurable. The feeling that I get when I watch a player play through my content for the first time is makes it all worth it. Makes all the late nights, makes all of the layoffs, all of the crunch, all of it is worth it. So, every time I get a comment on one of my videos, it makes all the editing and all that time that I spent worth it. So, if you want it, go for it, because you will find a place to do it, even if it's not where you expected, even if you have a setback. I thought I was set for life at Blizzard, and I ended up not being. So I'm creating something for myself, and you can do that too.
Yes. Thank you for your advice, Miss Laura, and
Thank
good
you.
luck to your goals. As I said, more success and
Yes,
making $1 billion job.
absolutely. And I wish for your success as well.
Thank you so much. What makes a fantasy protagonist compelling to you? Are you flawed heroes more relatable?
You cut out with the last, you said, what makes a fantasy character engaging to
Compelling.
you?
Yes,
Compelling. Yeah.
compelling to you. Are flawed heroes more relatable?
Okay. Um, I do think that flawed heroes are more relatable. I think overall what makes a hero compelling to me is that they have a realistic humanness to them. Whether or not they're flawed, I mean, to be human is to be flawed. But
Yes.
those extraneous details, like you don't need to know their favorite color, or you don't need to know, if they like or dislike certain foods, but adding those little bits of color to them really enhances it. Um, like I had to come up with a backstory for myself in Star Wars to work in the Star Wars land at Disneyland. And so I said that I have a mild coaxium allergy because that's the thing that they get on the ride. Like that's the whole plot of the ride that I work on. And so it just adds that flavor and depth that makes me feel more human. It's not really a flaw, but like, yeah, that's funny. Why am I not going on the ride and doing the mission? Well, because I'm allergic to it. That's why I have to send you.
Yes, indeed. And Miss Laura, how do you react when series subverts your expectations, killing a major character or twisting lore?
You know, Oftentimes those are the most memorable parts, but it has to be handled delicately, I think. I enjoy when something subverts my expectations if they've earned it. If I can look back at it and go, I see where they laid all of the pieces down. I see where they were going with this, and I just didn't pick up on it. But when something pulls a twist out of nowhere, that can feel unearned and almost like they were doing it just
For
because.
nothing, just for
Yeah.
nothing.
S-
That sucks. Sorry for that, but it is.
Oh yeah. It is the worst. I was the two things that come to mind when I think of those moments where I was just like, it was Frozen, like the Disney movie Frozen, when Hans
Yes.
was like, "Oh, if only someone out there loved you." I was like, "Oh, come on, really? How was I supposed to predict that?" And then the other one was Glenn on The Walking Dead.
Yes. So,
So,
yes. So, what role does thematic depth, like exploring power or identity, morality, play in your enjoyment?
yeah, I think that having a clear understanding of what you are trying to communicate as an author is really important for building a sense of that depth, because I honestly think, especially with fantasy series where you're building a world from the ground up, you're oftentimes engaging with real world themes, whether you like it or not. Star Wars says something about the real world when it creates an evil empire and a rebellion, regardless of what you think it is. And the impact of that is you can relate and call different governments the empire or the rebellion, and it's different based on your own lived experience. And that depth is created by the readers. So just being aware of what you want to communicate and avoiding communicating the opposite of that, because players are going to invent depth where there is none. They will draw lines where there wasn't anything there for you. But once you
Yes.
put a story out into the world, you kind of have to be uh, judicious of the message that you put in when you're creating it, because they'll pick up on stuff that you didn't even know you were putting down.
Miss Laura, before we wrap up our
Mhm.
discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, book 101 review in fifth season, too, comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 and Love Letters are in third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101. Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in first season. So please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Laura, is there a fantasy series that changed how you view the real world, and how did it do that?
This is going to sound silly, but the way that Wicked interpreted the land of Oz kind of made me look at things a little bit different because you grow up with Wizard of Oz. You grow up kind of
Yes.
knowing the story of it, but watching either the musical or reading the book or watching the recent movie of Wicked kind of helped me reframe a few things in the real world and kind of look at it from a different side and perspective of the wizard not being good, which we all knew kind of from Wizard of Oz, but they glamorize it, they kind of gloss over it, they make him into a bit of a nicer figure, whereas in the Wizard of Oz he's like not good at all, or in Wicked he's not good at all. And so just seeing, even within the course of the film, you go from loving Elphaba to seeing her as she's, the Wicked Witch. And I think using that lens in the real world is something that is important.
Important indeed. Can weak ending ruin an otherwise great series? And what endings have stayed with you for better or worse?
I do think a bad ending can ruin a series. I
Well,
I don't want to say too much because I do work in the Star Wars land, but
yes.
I wasn't a fan of where they went after the Force Awakens movie. And so I think that the ending of that franchise kind of soured it for a lot of people, but whereas we focus a lot more on like the beginning of the franchise in Star Wars land, but I think that's one that sticks out to me. And I also think, like, I didn't watch it, but just watching everybody turn on Game of Thrones for the ending of the TV series really set in stone how much a bad ending can really turn
True.
something for you
Yeah.
completely.
Totally agree. The first season is wow, great. Second season, awesome. Third season is wonderful. And the last season
Yep.
sucks.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Miss Laura Dean-Griego, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge to the world. So, can you
Thank you.
please invite our listeners to support your YouTube
Yes.
itself?
You can find me at Laura the Laura Keat, which is Laura the Laura Keat, LORIKEET on YouTube. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. It was I love
Likewise.
talking fantasy and world building with you, so that was great.
Likewise. Yes, people, let's support Miss Laura Dean Grego, because if you support her, it will become a $1 billion job. So, people, let's support her, and more and more and more empowering videos to come. So, Miss Laura, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
More to come, people. See you soon.
Sorry, you cut